You're listening to Top Line Winnipeg with Nick Lynham and Brady Ricketts, presented by From Financial.
Welcome back to the Top Line Winnipeg Jets podcast for our weekly episode, kind of taking a bigger overview of what's going on around the Winnipeg Jets. Before I get rolling and get to the buffet, as you know I like to get to, let's bring in Brady Ricketts, already giggling at that. How you doing today, Brady?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to talking about this. I see the research notes are deep. They are lengthy. I see a ton of quotes. I cannot wait to hear the tangents, the ravings of the mad lunatic Nick Lynham himself.
I don't know if there's going to be any mad ones today, actually. The vibes are pretty good today for me still. Obviously, last night was not the game we wanted to see, and I think there's some struggles that are starting to show themselves with the Winnipeg Jets over the tougher stretch.
Especially against the Atlantic.
Yeah, that's the division beating them up right now, eh? But we'll get into some of the breakdown on what we're seeing with the performance, some of the underlying numbers through 18 games, some of the on-ice stuff. But it was an interesting week. We got a lot of content from people with the Jets organization. Kevin Cheveldayoff jumped in and did a podcast with Frank Saravelli this week. Scott Arniel jumped in with Darren Drager and Ray Ferraro to do a guest spot there. Gabe Velarde did a bit of ground control, which is the Jets' personal project. And Rick Bowness jumped on. I forget the guy's name. The guys from St. Louis do that longer form podcast. Bones jumped
Cam
in.
and Jansen.
Yes. And Bones jumped on for the back half of their episode. And it was a really interesting look into Rick Bowness. A lot of reflection on his career, different aspects. And, of course, some of that came with what had kind of happened with him in Winnipeg. So I just thought it would be interesting to dive into some of that. Then we'll dive into a bit of what's going on with the Jets, and we'll end this off with looking at some of the prospects and how they're performing early on. There's been some really nice D+1 breakouts later in the draft past the guys we normally talk about, as well as some really strong performances from the upper half of the farm. So how does that sound for an episode this week, Brady?
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I like that you got a little layered, like a nice little sandwich. Let's get into it.
Let's start with Chevy. Let's start with Chevy's presser. A lot of interesting stuff there. What area do you think we should start off here?
You know what? I want to start with the meetings in the summer because in the past we've heard rumors of those going atomically nuclear bad. So I think this is a good place to start to show maybe a bit of a swap in just the relationship between the upper management and the players at this point.
Yeah, Chevy was really open compared to normal Chevy speak with Saravelli this week, it felt like. And I wonder if that is a bit of an organizational shift with some of the public messaging. We shall see. But obviously a lot of the conversation was brought up about what happened last year in the first round. What did those exit meetings look like? How did you decide to approach a new staff with Rick Bowness retiring? And what was that kind of look like? So there's a lot of that kind of talk bunched in. And I thought there were some interesting points. On the side of the players' meetings, Chevy was very open that during their meetings this year, they wanted it to be everything out there, open and honest. The management was going to tell the players how they felt about their game, certain things for good and bad, but the players were more than open to do the same, and I think that's healthy. Like I think
it's almost
that's
like arbitration for an exit meeting,
in a sense, right? Because I think it's fair to say last year, especially in that moment, after you put up a 110-point season, you end the season on an 8-game winning streak, so you think you're peaking going into the playoffs, and you get steamrolled. And I think with that, there has to be a lot of internal reflection, and maybe we should be pushing different buttons and whatnot like that, right? So I did find it interesting that Chevy really talked about how there was a lot of productive conversations that came from having that type of approach in an exit meeting rather than just kind of giving a player a player grade and, hey, work on this for the summer. This is where we see your games at. I think that kind of stuff is actually healthy for any kind of organization. Is you want to hear different opinions. You want to hear from your staff, your management team, your execs on different aspects to help the business take another step. And I don't think hockey's any different or sports are any different when you're looking at the bigger picture, right? There's an end goal. You want to get there. You want to continue taking strides. And it's safe to say, since Paul Maurice was fired, Rick Bowness came in, this org has taken strides 3 straight years, in my opinion. But it's encouraging to see them very publicly talking about that side of things now. And it's very encouraging. I felt like for a long time in Winnipeg, they would really sell on how good their regular season was. They would really sell on this idea that they were close in the playoffs. And it seems like with both Chevy and Arniel, they're really sending the message that we haven't accomplished anything yet this year. And that's a nice shift from a public aspect for someone like me to hear personally. What do you think of that kind of thing around the Winnipeg Jets?
1,000%. Like, it's I think this kind of leads into like a further talking point that he has, but like it's leading to more genuine top-down conversations between the players, the organizations, and all that. I think it's better when, like, if it's done in a respectful way, sure, where it's not just like bashing, like, you know, ex-players bad at these whole things, like, and nothing constructive for that. Whereas like if you come at it in a way where it's like, yeah, like, there's good, bads to all this, but like air it out in a proper way, help it set up like a game plan to what you can get. This, like, we're gonna get into it a bit more, like to get 1% better every day or every year. Like those type of margins make a huge difference in the NHL because all these guys are the top of their class. They're elite of the elite.
And when you talk about getting 1% better, that is something actually Chevy arrived to in that interview where he said, despite having this back and forth, at the end of last year, the players really did wear on themselves for the most part to a man. And that the leadership group really got together this summer wanting to each person get that 1% better. What are we going to do this summer? The common phrasing I've seen around this team right now is how much last year was an embarrassment. And that kind of thing, to finally hear that from this team, it's a big emotion, right? If you're feeling embarrassed by your performance, if you're feeling embarrassed by what you do at work, that's when you actually want to take strides, right? Like, you can kind of get off and go and be okay with your job. You know, we're doing just fine, and you're not going to make those productive changes. But when you feel that type of embarrassment, it does become a bit of an internal motivator. And I do think you've seen it. One aspect I thought has been interesting in both Arniel and Chevy and Bowness's interview, that everyone's had kind of the same take on this player. And it matches up with what has driven me nuts about this player in the past. So clearly everyone's kind of seen that this lacked, and now we're seeing this player take care. And it's how each coach and GM has kind of spoken very highly about Kyle Connor while acknowledging the fact that this year, him actually being involved in the two-way game and wanting to be a part of the full 200 feet game is actually helping him take that next level into potential stardom, and why he's getting a lot more recognition, and how him actually helping on D and backtracking on D, creating turnovers the other way, is helping him create offense. That was something that was like a big thing that irked me in his game in the past, and you're seeing all levels, both the former coach, the new coach, and Cheveldayoff starting to talk about that, like wanting to see those strides from internal, and seeing someone like that who does have the capability take that upon them and become a bit of a leader. Chevy also did bring up that post Blake Wheeler losing his C, Rick Bowness coming in and wanting to give the room more of a voice. And Rick Bowness got into this in his podcast as well. So I find the overlap very interesting this week, talking about how Kyle Connor was always kind of the quiet guy that would show up to do his job. And he kind of had that perception in the media too, right? Like you'd see him doing an interview and it wouldn't be a bad interview, but there was nothing really coming from it. And then we were talking a couple weeks back how really liked his approach to one of the practice interviews, I believe it was, after a team win, that apparently he's really become a guy now a lot more invested in team meetings, a lot more vocal. And another guy like that is apparently Dylan Sandberg, Chevy specifically brought up. So it's good to see like more guys really wanting to grab and be a part of leading it the right way, rather than, hey, those guys are leaders. We'll come and do our job. But it does seem like what happened last year in the first round and what we're hearing out of the room and what we're seeing on the ice for the most part, maybe there was some embarrassment and we're going to see something different this year.
Yeah. I mean, even just to talk on Kyle Connor specifically, like, well, we talk about the NHL players as a whole. Like, they're the most competitive. All professional athletes are the most competitive people, right? They're wired differently. Imagine you're Kyle Connor and you hear from NHL, like, it's not a quiet secret that NHL executives outside the Winnipeg would call him an empty calorie goal scorer, right? Imagine hearing that about yourself. Like, I wouldn't want to hear that. I'd be embarrassed by that too. It's good to see that things are finally maybe starting to click on the not just accountability as a group, but accountability for the individuals and their own like self-accountability as well, which is, I think, huge.
And I'll say this on the approach because a lot of this is public messaging, and at the end of the day, the actions and what happens moving forward will decide whether that was just a narrative that sounded great, but it is different from what we normally see from Winnipeg, in my opinion, watching it. The other aspect, too, is, and I talked about this on the postgame show because I really, really enjoyed this. It just really matches up with how I kind of see how you should approach an NHL season and how you should approach how you think the quality of your team is. Last night, we got a sneak peek into the Winnipeg Jets dressing room for the pregame speech from Scott Arniel as a bit of a segue into Scott Arniel being in the history books for the 15-1 start. And it was his message that I liked because it started off with, what was the quote? We are what we consistently do. Mm-hmm. And I like that twist on that concept rather than we are what our record says we are. Because when you look at we are what your record says you are, is you're looking at the past and not necessarily breaking down the quality of what has come into that. Whereas if you're messaging it the way Scott Arniel appears to be messaging it based on a small clip, you're still looking into the future and wanting to continue to build off of where you've started. And I think that's a positive approach to not let this team fall into, hey, we were the number one team in the league for the first 16 games. What an accomplishment. You're seeing that this org kind of put the pedal down and say, this still isn't good enough. We've accomplished nothing. And I heard both Arniel and Chevy say that this week, that we've accomplished nothing at this point. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, absolutely. No, I just like to see that public messaging and it ties into the accountability that we've talked about in years past. It talks about it. It ties in the process and why certain things matter for you to be successful from April to June. So a lot of good stuff we're hearing publicly. We'll see how it translates over 82 games plus playoffs as the season goes on. But I did find those things to be kind of interesting. What other areas of Chevy's podcast do you think we should dive into here?
Why don't we talk about, there's one little quote I loved on, that he talked about how he answers to 800,000 general managers. I loved that. But I guess more specifically, let's talk about more about when he talked about, continuity within the organization.
Yeah, Chevy really opened up about, you can see that he really does enjoy the aspect of being in a small market where I'm not sure a lot of people would, because they'd kind of talked to him and Frank about how in such a small market you can't really hide. And Chevy kind of talked about like, yeah, there's 800,000 general managers wanting to see certain things happen. And he's like, I could walk into the local coffee shop and know what the mood is around the team because the people are feeling it, right? And yeah. That is like the aspect of being passionate in this market about the hockey team. It is like the biggest thing in Winnipeg as far as what people get excited about. Obviously, Grey Cups today and the Bombers have a chance to do. I don't know how many it's been, but they've been on quite the run the last little bit. Yeah. But it was cool to see like Chevy really want to embrace that and have that kind of thing. Though, and I thought his answer was interesting when it came to the continuity. I cannot.
Continuity.
Continuity. Yeah, there we go. Continuity. He had said he was asked about running it back essentially, and how after last year's playoff race there wasn't really much change. He brought the team back, And Frank had kind of pitched the idea that continuity was probably be part of how this starts come together from Arniel just sliding over, bringing a bunch of guys that know each other back together. And Chevy had kind of answered about that, and it was an interesting answer because I don't think we've really heard him talk about it. But he was really talking about studying successful teams in this league. And one thing he had come to is it's tough to change 180 degrees too often. I'll preface this and say I don't think the Jets have ever tried to pivot 180 degrees, so it's not like
Not once.
yeah. So like the whole too often thing is like a little bit of a stretch for how he's
It's
looking
pretty
at it,
tongue in
too.
cheek. It's got to be tongue in cheek.
It has to be a little bit of a stretch here. We haven't seen them move any degree off. So too often it was like, okay. But he says you almost get like a whiplash as far as bringing it all together within the expectations of it. When you make a 180-degree turn, your ownership might expect something. Your captains and leaders might expect something. Your fan base might expect something. And it becomes a bit of a mess on what to expect. Everyone will have different ideas of what that looks like. He also talked about organically these players grew up together and they want to win together. And obviously we saw that come into fruition, I think, on a public level with the Connor Hellebuck and the Mark Scheifele joint contracts. So that's something I totally am buying. We hear Connor Hellebuck proudly announce that other than the 3 personal stat accomplishments, which he's going to reach likely this year, the only thing he's missing in his NHL career is a Stanley Cup. And the fact that he put his name on a piece of paper after talking to Chevy and Scheifele and likely other guys within that room, I do buy that is true. But again, I'll preface that there's buts when it comes to stuff like that, when the other side of it is we know this core isn't quite up to Stanley Cup level. And I think Chevy's really, I don't know if lying to himself would be the right word, but he's really blinded by the people he put together over this decade and, or I guess 14 years, what is it now? 13, 14 years? So I like that they want to be here. They want to win together. They want to do this as a group. It is a reality, though, that Cheveldayoff will have to go and get a core-level player to help the core he's put together actually take that step to actually winning together. Yep. So as much as you like to hear that kind of stuff, there is still work to be done. And then, of course, really high praise for Connor Hellebuck. You can't say anything without Connor Hellebuck and what he's meant to this organization. We're really proud of where that pick's come, kind of thing. And that's the reality of it. And at the end of the day, you end up with a goalie like that, now in the backside of his career, go and do what you can to try and win him a cup. That's where I'm at. The quotes are great. It's nice to see like a more open Chevy where you can look into what he's thinking a little bit. But at the end of the day, you still have to go out and make the moves to put this team over. And it's fun to get, I'm more optimistic this year than I have been in years past with the Winnipeg Jets potentially doing the right things to take that step.
Yeah.
But until it happens, that doubt will still be in the back of my head personally.
Yeah, I think it definitely helps with them. I think this year more so than others, just being a bit more transparent and the thinking, reflection as well. Hindsight's always 20/20. And I think when Chevy and whoever kind of talks about the past, they do it very well. And they go, it comes across that they're actually trying to learn from past mistakes. I think the 180-degree thing still is quite haunting to me. I think that's kind of crazy, especially when we maybe have seen like a 4 or 5 degree swat shift at most. But can't
do it too often though. You can't do it too often.
Can't. No, you can't do it too often. But one thing I did see is maybe once again a compliment towards Kyle Connor, but a backhand towards one Rutger McGroarty when he's talking about KC.
Yes.
So Chevy says Kyle Connor did the right way, came from college, went to the American League for all of 4 games. And I believe his success now comes from the fact that he's applied the two-way side much more than any time in his career. And I believe it's helped his offensive side. Completely agree with that too. I read that and I was like, that seems like a bit of a dig.
So I'm gonna correct you a little bit. So the 4 games thing was like his second year pro.
Okay.
Out of camp, he did play half a season with the Moose the year prior. So I'll add that in. But you took it the exact same way that I took it. That was definitely another Kevin Cheveldayoff, Rucker McGrody shot. And I love the pettiness.
Yeah.
I think both parties are allowed to handle it how they have. Did you see Rucker asked about the Winnipeg chants?
No.
He was laughing about the Where's Rucker chants and how that's a passionate fan base, and it was funny to hear. So everyone's playing into it, right?
I mean, he's absolutely tearing up the A right now.
Mm-hmm. And then when you look at that quote, yeah, he's struggled.
He's donuts, I believe, still.
No, he's gone on the board.
Oh, okay.
Or assists, anyways. But it is kind of right about Kyle Connor and his growth, and it's another open admission that some of the stuff we've talked about and people don't like to hear. Mm-hmm. The org sees it themselves, whether they're publicly admitting it in those times or the story is going to come out later, right? It's one of those things. Mm-hmm. I did love him taking a push for Adam Lowry on Team Canada as well.
I was just about to say that too.
Yeah, Kevin Cheveldayoff on Adam Lowry. You're trying to build a team, not an all-star team. What he brings to a team, to the room, to the ice, good on faceoffs, can play wing, can play center, can rough you up, can go to the net for a tip-in. And then he added at the end, and I think Scheifele and Morrissey would be good candidates too, but it was really interesting to see him put the push on for Adam Lowry.
I would be kind of shocked if J-Mo's not kind of right up there on that Team Canada team. I don't get who's better right now.
J-Mo should be there.
Yeah. I guess like a nice little wrap up to the Chevy media hit is discussing last year's first round exit and kind of, I know you touched on a little bit about the exit meetings and the accountability to that. But I think one thing that kind of is a great way to look forward is just one quote that those wounds won't heal until we find success. Love that. I heard a lot as a Leafs fan.
So I feel two different ways about that quote because I do like that quote and it shows you that they're not happy with how last year went. They're not happy with the lack of success. But at the end of the day, I just don't buy the narrative that losing will eventually make you a winner. I don't. I don't because it's happened. Like we saw it with Tampa. We saw it with Colorado. We've seen that aspect, but those are also like the best players in this league. Those are some of the best cores in this league who went deeper more recently than the Winnipeg Jets. The Winnipeg Jets are talking about getting over the first round hump, not winning it, or like not trying to, the pain of just missing a cup. We're talking about the pain of trying to get through the first round. So I just can't buy this idea that by simply getting wounded up, they're going to figure it out when I still think there's a talent deficiency on the roster.
Yeah. 100%. I don't agree with you. I think the last Jets round win was the COVID season, right? Sweep against Edmonton, sweep then by Montreal, which that was an outrageous playoffs just in general. But so from there, do you want to start getting into the Arniel hit on Ray and Dregs? Or is there anything else you want to touch on from the Cheveldayoff stuff?
No, let's tie one last point on the Chevy stuff with the Arniel stuff because I think it's a good segue. Chevy talked about, Frank Saravelli approached us the same way I was thinking this summer when the Arniel news came out, and it came out that the Jets had only interviewed 3 coaches. And my take at that point was, we'll see what happens with Arniel, though I think you're doing yourself a disservice by not interviewing more candidates. Yeah. And getting different ideas, right? Because hiring periods is a time where you could talk to people freely and gather new ideas about your organization, gather different opinions. And I think there's a real value in that in the NHL. So Frank had actually asked that question, prefacing it the exact same way. And Chevy was, the answer was really interesting. And I respect it on a human and personal level. And it was, So the direct question was, wouldn't you like to go through a process of speaking to more candidates and listening to more ideas? And Chevy said, only if it's genuine. These people are pouring their hearts into trying to win this job. And if I'm just talking to them, yeah, it just doesn't feel right. Like, you have to go in there with a genuine curiosity, genuine thought that we might hire someone. And I do respect that idea, and the fact that they knew Scott Arniel was likely going to be him and they were comfortable with that. So when you hear it framed that way, I do think it changes my perspective a little bit. What do you think of that?
Like, yes and no. Like, I do understand, like, yeah, you have someone coming in to get a job. They're obviously going to give you whatever you're kind of asking for. If you're giving them an opinion, they're going to tell you. At the same time, like, I think it is a little bit of a disservice still, because I'm very much on the I kind of lean myself towards the side of the spectrum where it's like, I think the more opinions and, insights that you get on your own team, whether you hire this person or not, like, I feel like that should just be a genuine conversation. Like, we sit down once a week to have a pretty genuine conversation about this team. You can't tell me you can open up the interview table to like 5 to 7 guys and see, what they have to say. I that one struck me as a little bit odd.
So I like where you went with that, because it ties in nicely to some of the big takeaways with the Arniel podcast. Mm-hmm. Let's get into it, because it was one of those things, and it seems like Arniel came in, obviously had to build a staff, and he was talking about how there were 6 different teams trying to hire multiple coaches like he did. And he wasn't necessarily as familiar with where we ended up with Dean Chinowith and Davis Payne specifically. So they almost got their external stuff from talking to different assistant coaches and different penalty kill coaches and different coaches from within different orgs that could bring a little something to Winnipeg. And Arniel really stressed that. He went into the summer when he was looking for assistants, and the specialty teams was his biggest priority, which makes a ton of sense. The Jets were mediocre last year, bottom third across the board in specialty teams. And he said when he started talking to Davis Payne, like, his eyes like really lit up. He was very interested in what he was talking about, some of the stuff that had been built up in, I believe Davis came from Carolina, and some of his background there, that he got excited about the idea of Davis Payne running a power play just from his presentations. And then he said a guy like that did such a good job that in August he was reaching out to the guys that were going to be on the power play to start pitching them new ideas and selling them new ideas. And they kind of talked about how, and Chevy did a little bit too, when they were bringing people in or bringing the assistant coaches in, the assistant coaches were impressed with certain aspects that the Winnipeg Jets had been doing that their orgs weren't, but they brought an influx of wealth and experience from other organizations. Like Dean Chinowith's been a head coach in this league, and he's now been bouncing around as a specialty teams coach. So I think they did get that information gathering big picture with how Arniel approached the hiring process, because he didn't just go and find like some guys that he was buddies with. He was genuinely listening to all parties, and I think that's been a huge part of his success early on. He was saying that in some of those meetings, like they would have real back and forths on stuff they disagree with and different ways to approach things. And I think it's that kind of stuff you want to see. You don't want to just see someone agree with the leader necessarily. You want to push different ideas and see the best one win out. So I think it was just another tip in the cap of how Arniel's approached this entire second chance and why he's getting the results he has in Winnipeg.
Yep, 100% agree. Couldn't agree more. So there's some other nice little quotes from Arniel on that as well. He talked about some of his previous head coach experience and even being an assistant coach. He says previous head coaching experience and being an associate felt like it made it easier to take the job. He was able to speak and take over meetings last year, which is awesome. Lots of talks with the players and met with the captains down in Calgary, which it's always interesting too when you hear of assistant coaches that get moved up into the head coach role. It's not oftentimes that it's like this smooth transition, because apparently the relationship between assistant coaches and head coaches is quite different on the player side. Assistant coach is a bit more buddy, a bit more personalized, Whereas the head coach, that's kind of the boss. So even just him taking the transition from assistant to head coach, and it's working well for him too. So that's a great part as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things like you nail exactly why it's hard, and it was my concern if this was gonna flop. Is it's a big aspect to jump from being that buddy to being the guy that has to be the drill sergeant and be the bad guy when things aren't going well. And I think Arniel's done a very good job. It's clear as day, and we've talked about this a few times. It's clear as day he learned from his mistakes. He's talked about them very openly and often about what happened in Columbus, why he was ready for it now, and what happened in between from his time in Washington and really learning how to understand analytics and work with the analytics staff on what he wants to see from them and start to be more cohesive within an organization instead of being my way or the highway. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing a lot of that too, where he's been very vocal about the idea he wants the entire organization to be more cohesive, from the management to the scouting staff to the players to the video guys, and trying to make this all work, bring in new data, bring in new information. He talked about how analytics now, they're really incorporating it into their team video sessions so that the team could see it. He kind of mentioned that some players are more open to it when they do their individual meetings and some aren't, but they're really starting to incorporate a bigger picture vision than maybe we've seen in the years past from the top down. So there's a lot of optimism on how Arniel's really taken this approach, and he's wanted to bring in different opinions. He's wanted to really push his own boundaries. Those are the type of things you want to be seeing, right? And for him to fly down to Calgary to meet with all three of the captains and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is what we want to do. We're going to make changes here, and start to get everybody on board in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
It shows you how clearly he wants this to be successful when you're able to check your own ego at the door, right?
Yep. And even he, too, was echoing some of the sentiments of embarrassment from last year's playoff round loss that Chevy was talking about with Frank Saravelli, too, right? And he says, what people maybe don't understand, the embarrassment, frustration that we went through after such fantastic year as a group through 82 games. We didn't have great highs and great lows, and we felt we were rising at the right time. Thought we were a perfect match for Colorado. I firmly disagree with that one. And we got embarrassed. Embarrassed still stings. We don't get handed a Stanley Cup in November. All those things ring true. The perfect match thing for Colorado, I don't necessarily understand, but it kind of just speaks to further, like, top down. There's like this bad taste in the mouth from the head office, the coaching staff, at least Arniel, and the players. That, I mean, the start to this year and everything we've heard so far, when there has been a win that was probably not quite deserved, and them, instead of taking it as the win, but as a place to grow on, it's hard to kind of bet against what's going on right now. At least, the mindset side.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the public, the mindset, the quotes, everything is a clear shift from where they were during the Maurice era. It's night and day. And as someone
it's less excuse driven from the Paul Maurice era.
Yeah, I went on a bit of a rant about him on the post-game show last game. And Rick Bowness kind of takes a little bit of an underlying shot at Maurice, but we'll get into that in a second here. And I just like that they're acknowledging that last year was such an embarrassment. When it comes to the match with Colorado, I think where you were able to sell yourself, if you're a fan of the Winnipeg Jets last year, if you were in the team, they beat them 7-1 like 2 days before the playoff starts. But also, if you looked at how the things were going down the stretch, the Winnipeg Jets' depth was really performing as well as their top line. It seemed like a matchup where if you can neutralize the top guys on Colorado a little bit, that your depth might win out. And then you looked at the goaltending matchup, and it was Forgiev versus Hellebuck. I could see how you could sell yourself on that. I was selling myself on a 7-gamer. I shouldn't have, but I did. So I could see that side of it. And I still like the idea that we don't get handed the Stanley Cup in November. It's clear that he's keeping his finger on this pulse to not allow the bad habits, bad stretches to break in. And I think they did have some pretty great highs last year, and I don't think the lows were as low, so I could see how that would be so frustrating. They're saying all the right things at the end of the day, right? They're seeing all the right things.
Yeah, you're just hoping that the on-ice stuff continues, as well as the verbal messaging as well, which so far so good.
Yeah, what'd you think about his quote on Kyle Connor's release?
I mean, it's
pretty, man. The way he's shooting the puck this year is pretty fucked to watch.
it's hard to argue against. I mean, the guy just scores goals like you never see. Like, the shot's coming from Kyle Connor, and it's still ending. It's very quick. It's very quick. It's a different style than like the Austin Matthews, where it's like kind of the curl and drag. I think Kyle Connor just is so lethal with his ability to locate the shot too. That really kind of separates himself from the rest of the crowd.
Yeah, so the quote was, I put Kyle Connor's release in the top 5 guys I've seen. Don't see many guys that can whip it like that.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
He was also asked the difference on the power play. Obviously, it's been the biggest success story in Winnipeg early on this year. They went from a absolutely stagnant and vomit-inducing power play to watch to one of these exciting ones overnight, like with the same roster. And he was asked what the difference is, and he said, attack mentality, not looking to keep it to the outside. We want to get the puck, have numbers in battles, and get pucks to the blue paint. Moving Ehlers in that bumper spot, or as we call it, the pop spot, has been a huge because of his quickness and his shot.
Yep.
And it's that mentality, man. Last year, they would pass the puck around the zone forever. Maybe get an outside shot. But the side of the Ehlers part of it, I like that they're the framing of the pop spot, because he doesn't stay in the bumper the entire power play. He pops into it when there's certain spots, like Velarde getting the puck down low or Scheifele on the corner. But when a guy like Kyle Connor has the puck, he goes down to the corner to support him and become an option from that side. And when you look at why you'd want a quicker guy in the bumper spot is for rebounds and being able to adjust from there, right? I think just looking at the entirety of those two conversations, you're hearing a lot of the right things you want to hear from an organization that's ready and wants to take another step. You're hearing the right approaches. You're hearing a lot of things I'd be confident in, but I will continue to preface it. Words are words. Actions are actions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So where do we want to move to from here, Brady?
Well, I see that we have a bunch of JFresh analytics stuff in the chat. I know you probably want to touch on some of those. Is there any of those that are kind of sticking right out to you that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I think it's let's just take a little overview of the Winnipeg Jets as a team so far this year and how they've fared, both obviously 15-3-0. Mm-hmm. Largely driven from, I think, a lot of good in the sense that it seems like on the nights when they've been hot, it's been different guys producing. So you're seeing big guys step up at different times, which I think is important for a team's success. We've seen goaltending at certain times this season be the big part. And then we've seen the power play be the big part. So I just want to take a bigger overview on what we're seeing from Winnipeg, what the numbers are telling us, what we could kind of expect moving forward, some things to kind of work on, and what to kind of expect through the rest of this stretch in November, which I think has really started to expose the cracks. Now, I know this team was not going to go 82-0 or anything crazy like that. I think when you start to watch this team against the top competition, whether they win those games or lose them, you really want to take away how those games looked, what they can kind of learn from them, and what they're going to need to do come playoff time. Mm-hmm. And what the numbers are kind of telling us so far about the Jets' performance, is it sustainable? Obviously, I don't think anybody expects 15-3 to be sustainable at that, but what are the numbers telling us here? Where should we start? Let's go to the old expected goals. We're at the 18-game mark. Normally, you want to look and start taking a peek at these between 20 and 30 games as they start to normalize what you are as a team. And it tells us exactly what I think we've been seeing, though. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty close. Right now, at 5-on-5, the expected goals per 60 against the Winnipeg Jets are the 10th-ranked team at 2.32. Against, and I think that's strong, right? The Winnipeg Jets last year were in the top 10. They've maintained that structure. We've seen it exposed a little bit against teams like the Rangers, teams like Colorado, teams like Florida last night a bit. But it is a quality system, a quality defensive team that could probably use a talent infusion on that D-core to help push that system along. So that's a strong result. If you're in the top 10 and what you're giving up at 5-on-5 with Connor Hellebuck in net, I think that's a very positive place to be. Would like it to get a little bit better in some of the areas we're seeing now. The puck movement on the original breakdown in play needs to get better. It is what causes them to spend more time back there, and that's when you get kind of tired, system breaks down, someone gets caught running, things get worse. The other aspect too, something we've seen kind of developing over the last couple of weeks is it seems like some teams are trying to actually use point shots against Winnipeg more, or at least it feels like it, and then swarming the crease, swarming the net, and trying to outnumber, outmuscle, and just find ways to beat the Jets off of rebounds, which has been interesting because we've seen it kind of work against them.
Yeah.
So I wonder how they're going to approach that. But overall, 10th place, top 10. I think that's a strong place to be for this team at what they're producing on the defensive side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once again, goals saved above expected. Always going to be in the top 10 when you have someone like Connor Hellebuck starting the majority of your games. That's just once again a huge compliment to his consistency in the net throughout his career, especially at least in the regular season with the amount of workload that he's had put on him over the last few years as well.
Yeah, and it's when we're starting to look at some cracks in the armor, and I do think this is obvious because despite the streak and despite putting up some big numbers, we have been talking about this, and it's that at 5-on-5, the Winnipeg Jets don't necessarily, through 18 games, they're a mid-pack team in what they're creating and generating from the offensive side. They either put up some numbers, like they're one of those teams that really does well at creating against some of the softer teams in the league. But when it comes to some of these teams that you're going to have to face in the playoffs, it gets harder and harder for them to get slot shots, get to the net. You don't see them as active in those crucial areas. And that's why you'll see them at 15th ranked, tied with your Toronto Maple Leafs at 2.1 expected goals per game, per 60. I think you want to see the team get more creative offensively. A lot of their opportunities come off the rush, or they come from the low to high pass. And if you start to defend and break that low to high pass up, the Jets aren't as creative at finding ways to the danger zones. So I do think that's one area when just looking at what I'm seeing on the ice and trying to pair it with the numbers, what I'm seeing and why you would see the Jets being a bit into the mid-tier when it comes to generating expected goals. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, even when we start getting into some other stuff too, like the finishing for this team or the goals scored above expected is way higher than what we're seeing about their expected goals per 62. We've seen a bit of a decrease in their lead from the special teams goal for percentage too. So a bit of a come down to earth, not crazy, like it's still top 5.
And it was expected.
Yeah, and it was expected, but you're going to need to see this team, I suppose, just keep finishing above the level that they're expected to if they're going to have that success, at least on the 5-on-5 side, unless Connor Hellebuck and that D-core really just locks down where they're only letting in a goal a game.
And that's part of what you're going to see. Like, I'm kind of a believer. I think the Winnipeg Jets are going to be hovering around 500 for the month of November based on the schedule. And because of the hot start, it's not really going to hurt them in the standings or anything, but I think it's gonna really show people where this team's at with the bar. Like, I look at the Florida game. Florida is the bar for me. And it was just two different tiers of games. I know it's one game, and the Winnipeg Jets might come in Tuesday and smoke Florida. But it's how that game looked and how much it reminded me of last year's playoffs, that knowing that's there. And when you look at it, you mentioned it, goals scored above expected, though Florida and Vegas are the two teams ahead of them. 15 and a half more goals at 5-on-5 expected compared to what they're producing. So they're scoring at a really high clip considering they're a mid-pack team. And I think you're going to start to see that pull back as this schedule gets tougher. I mean, they have only scored 1 goal in the last 2 games, and I think that's going to be a trend that's going to keep hovering the other way.
Yeah.
And if you just look at their complete goals, 5-on-5 expected goals, comparing the offense to the defense, they sit right at 16 at 50.9%. And if you look at like preseason projections, that is where a lot of people would expect the Winnipeg Jets to be, is like in the middle pack of the NHL. So 5-on-5 continues to be an area specifically on offense, though there is some areas on D that I think they need to work on, though I think those areas are more talent-driven than system-driven. They're going to have to really, really, for me to buy that this group can take another step in the playoffs, that's an area they really have to buy and get themselves into like the top 10. For me to be confident over the course of the year, we're not going to run into the same stuff we've been running into every single first round.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm even looking at some of these ones, like we just talked about the Jets being that. Look at Florida's right now. Their goals scored above expected, and where they're at on expected goals per 60, they're even worse off. They're 19th right now. Jets have got them beat by at least a tenth of whatever those adjusted numbers or what you can call them at. But
And it was interesting before this little stretch here, the last few games. We had seen the Winnipeg Jets the first 2 weeks. It felt like, and the numbers backed it up, they were riding the specialty teams and they were riding the goaltending. Then the next 2 weeks, you saw the 5-on-5 progression. I believe Jacob Stoller had tweeted it out, and maybe I could find it here quick, about what the discrepancy looked like. But and we've been talking about, you want to continue to take steps over the course of the season, and it's not going to be linear progression. This is not me saying, hey, what you're seeing these last 4 games, 5 games is what you should necessarily expect. But it does feel like the last 4 or 5 games, we've seen a bit of a halting and a bit of a backwards movement in that element of the game. And it's interesting because I've seen this. It's interesting. Obviously, 15-3-0. Most of the market, as they should, this has been fun, wants to celebrate the fact this start's been hot. I think there's another aspect to the market that as soon as yesterday happened, this season was over. Like, jumped off the cliff. I've seen this story. This team doesn't have it. They're frauds. And I think there's a perfectly reasonable middle ground here. And it's that I think this team is very good. Maybe 15-3-0 is generous compared to who they are. And the Florida faithful made sure to let them know with the overrated chant that it might be generous to who they are.
That was a lot of fun, too. I can't believe all 12 of them got that crazy in the stands to me at that herd.
Hey, man, they've been doing well in the attendance. I can't shit on that.
Very well. They're doing very well now.
I can't shit on Florida. Where did I want to go with that? Oh, the middle ground. so there was the two sides, and I think there's just a perfectly capable middle ground where we're game 18. Lots of time before the deadline. Lots of time before the playoffs. We're going to go through some hot stretches. We're going to go through some cold stretches. We know a lot about who this team is. I'm not writing them off as a first-round exit yet, though if the season ended today, even at 15-3-0, that's where I'd place my money on, is them losing in the first round, if I'm being completely honest, based on how I see this team match up with the teams I believe will be there at the very end of it. But there's a lot of reason to be optimistic that this team can take a step this year, despite what we're going to see in regression naturally the rest of this month. And it's some of the stuff we were talking about with the coaching staff wanting to be more cohesive. Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about the embarrassment of last year. Like, there's that feeling that they know they need to start taking a step. They have the assets in-house. They have cap space. They also have some players in the farm that might impact the team at some point this year. Not that I'm necessarily optimistic the Winnipeg Jets go that route in a year they're trying to compete. But I do think the organization, top down, is still in a pretty positive spot where if they wanted to really take a step and really get past those wounds, if they put their balls on the table, I do think the Winnipeg Jets are a good enough team that if you go swinging, you're in this thing in the West. It's a pretty open year, I do think. I just think the Jets fall slightly short on the talent threshold when it comes to the contenders.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you want to jump into some of the bonus comments then too?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, bonus. It was interesting because he really reflected on his time in Winnipeg later in the interview. Obviously, was asked about the room he was taking over, and like he really went into how bad it was, and it really irks me that the man that left it this way is about to get a standing O for winning a cup with another organization. It feels like you're cheering for your ex getting married 3 months after she dumped your ass. Like it's gonna be such a. I just can't stand the market's love for that guy, but. Bonus even talked about how he came into that room. It was a mess. Everyone in the league knew it. Multiple players wanted out. It was toxic in there. They were the 30th ranked defensive team. They missed the playoffs the year before and clearly were underperforming for years. Who does that all fall onto? The guy that there's going to be a standing O for winning a fucking cup in Florida. Like, it drives me nuts, this market on that guy sometimes. And Bones went into that and how he had to really change all that from stripping Blake Wheeler of the C to that Vegas collapse post-presser. He got into the details behind that, which I thought was interesting because obviously at the time he came out and walked the comments back and he was trying to play nice because he was coming back the next year and he was the big bad guy at the time. He really got into that and I thought it was interesting because when he said when he had come in, he knew it was his last job. He didn't care. He was coming in to fix what he was told needed fixing. And he was excited about the team till January, and then the spiral happened. And he started asking the assistant coaches, is this what you've seen for the last few years? Like, is this what it is? And they're like, yeah. So he started, like, really putting the pedal down. He's like, we're not letting this happen. We're not letting this happen. And he's like, we started scraping for a playoff spot that year, which was crazy. They were, like, one game away from the biggest collapse in NHL history. Wiped away by a win at the end of the year. And he had kind of said when he was asked about snapping like that after the game, he's like, oh, it wasn't just about that one game. The one game was like pathetic or whatever, but I was in these guys' ears for months, and it was really about me setting a message and tempo for next season. That we just cannot have this anymore. We cannot have these type of collapses. We cannot just give up on everything in January and coast our way into the playoffs. So it was really interesting to hear that perspective, that it was a calculated move.
Interesting, he walked it back after. Hearing that he was like, I don't really, like, it's my last job. I don't give a shit.
So what he had kind of said was he had given it to them in the second intermission, but he might have framed it a little bit different than what he had said publicly to the media. So he was just, he wanted to respect the room, and he believes that if you're going to say something publicly, you should say it that way to the team privately first, so they're kind of prepared and they've heard it already. So I think that was it, and he was just trying to still keep that respect because you still wanted to take that next step the next year, right? But it was pretty interesting to hear him dive into that kind of stuff, and then his decision to walk away. He was just kind of getting tired, and he was kind of thinking that by November this year he might want to retire, so he didn't want to put the team in that spot. But I found that kind of stuff interesting now, years later, to hear it so publicly announced and so publicly talked about.
Mm-hmm. There was stuff that we had always heard rumors on.
Brady Ricketts, I was called the Winnipeg Jets QAnon for saying Blake Wheeler was a problem in the dressing room.
Dead on, though. I mean, like, it's like we've talked about this before, too. Like, living in such a small market, there's not a ton of internal secrets, really.
100%.
But, yeah, I love getting those insights of, especially on the coach's side, where they're like, yeah, you know what? There were some real fucking issues there that we had to clean up.
For sure.
They were because of me.
For sure. So, that's all that stood out. Bonus talked a lot. If you're interested in hearing the experience of a veteran head coach, going to different teams, different situations, coaching with Gretzky and stuff, I'd go listen to it on your free time. I just thought the Jets points were kind of interesting, looking back to now and looking to where we are as an organization. In 3 years, like, they've taken real strides from where they were when Mr. Snake Oil walked away and quit on them. So, where do you want to move from here? Want to talk some prospects before we get out of here?
Yeah, let's do that. I know you got some late round darts you want to hype up?
Yeah, the Winnipeg Jets prospect pool continues to be off to some strong starts, both with the Manitoba Moose and in junior hockey this year. I'm going to kind of go through in probably my order of the Winnipeg Jets prospect pool, at least at the top of it. But then there's been some really, really interesting late round draft +1 and draft +2 type players that are taking some interesting strides early on this year. And these are the type of assets when we get to the trade deadline that you got to wonder who's going to be in play. When I'm looking at some of these like late round guys that have really taken strides, like say a Kevin He or a Kieran Walton, who will get into what their seasons have looked like. I wonder how much value a breakout like that would have on the trade market. Like obviously these aren't prime prospects, but they're all of a sudden showing that there's potential for them to be NHLers one day. And if you're an organization, if you could turn a guy that was drafted in the 6th round into a pretty decent piece in an upgrade trade, I think that becomes a net win when you're looking just from an asset management perspective.
Yep.
So let's look at it. My guy, Elias Salmonson, off to a great start with the Manitoba Moose on the right side of the D core. I do think this is the one guy you could project as a top 4 defenseman in Winnipeg. And I really do wonder what he would look like beside Josh Morrissey when he is ready for the big leagues. Just the way he plays, I think they could really help free each other up some ice. 12 games played, first season in North America, which is another interesting part to a player like that, is that development or that adjustment to the ice surface. And we had seen Salmonson really make that adjustment fairly quickly in training camp, which I thought was a pretty interesting positive. Because he had started training camp pretty slow. It seemed like he was uncertain on gaps and decision-making. And by the end of camp, we're like, man, is he going to be the 6th defenseman? So it was interesting you saw that jump so quickly. Speaks to high IQ, I think, in the player. In his first 12 games with the Manitoba Moose, 3 goals, 6 assists for 9 points. As a D+1 D-man, I'll take that.
We'll see you after Christmas.
I mean, right? Like, if you continue this on for like 3-4 months, at some point you got to think about it, right?
Yeah.
It's early, but he is the player I am really excited about in the farm system. We just haven't drafted and developed a quality right-handed D since Trouba, I think. Mm-hmm. So Elias does give me a lot of excitement. Might be because of the dearth at the position recently, but he's a guy I'm pretty big on in today's modern NHL. Also with the Moose, Brad Lambert slowed off his hot start. 12 games played, 1 goal, 6 assists for 7 points.
Yeah.
You'd like to see a little bit of an uptick there, I think, given how highly we see Brad Lambert and his potential ability to impact the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah. That's okay, though, if he's taking strides on that defensive and battle side of the puck that we kind of highlighted before the roster was finalized earlier this season.
And that's the thing. Like, to just put it out there bluntly, I haven't been watching much of the Moose hockey right now between the Jets doing these podcasts and I'm studying for an exam for school. I just haven't been able to. So I'm not sure on the Brad Lambert what that game's looked like. I'm just trying to provide a little update on some of the stat lines we're seeing and some of the excitement we're seeing. But speaking of Manitoba Moose and exciting stat lines, Nikita Chibrikov continues his he had a really good camp, continues a hot start with the Manitoba Moose. 13 games played, 3 goals, 8 assists for 11 points for the attitude-filled Russian winger. Like to see that. I do wonder, again, just looking at it, but also knowing what his play style is like, I do wonder if he becomes the first call-up for a bottom 6 injury, or do they go back to the Dominic Toninato type thing? Something to consider once if we see, knock on wood, no injuries. Interesting player for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah. Well, Perfetti's hurt right now, right? I guess we don't have much news on it. What do you think a call-up is down the line if he's out for an extended amount of time?
I'm really curious about that. I don't know what to expect. Cole Perfetti left the game, 20 seconds left in the second. If I remember right, it looked like he was grabbing his wrist, which could be nerve-wracking.
Sounds like he blocked a shot with his hand, right? So if we just say whatever, it's a broken bone in his hand, and he's out a couple months, maybe, depending on how bad it is.
You'd have to think they consider it, right? If it's
Yeah.
that like long term of an injury. If it's a shorter term, I imagine they give Gus some runway.
Yeah.
Though I wonder if Gus comes in for Kupari tomorrow. I do wonder if
But
Hamel
like, I
comes in for
don't think
Fleury.
if Perfetti's out, I don't think you realistically look in your depth chart and go, who's got higher upside, Dominic Toninato or one of Chibrikov or Lambert?
Agreed.
Yeah,
And if you have months like that, like we have no idea what this injury is, and I'm hoping it's nothing serious because he's looked really good as of late. I think Cole Perfetti's really found his place in the NHL, and it was disappointing to see him skate off. Haven't heard nothing yet, but if it is longer term, I think you do take that time to really try and see what you have from one of your higher upside players in the organization, especially knowing they're going to be playing with Ehlers and Nemestikov, unless we see a bit of a roster shakeup here.
And I think with the record that it is right now, you have the opportunity to bring one of those guys up and maybe try and shelter them in some minutes that they might lose, knowing that overall the Jets are doing the right things at the moment.
So the one thing I said about this on the post-game show last night is I do think part of it is the organization might be a little careful to pull that trigger right now when the record is 15-3, because we know players will see like 15-3 and be like, why are we panicking? Why are we like throwing a bomb into the lineup? Now, if you go on a bit of a slide or there's an injury, I think it becomes a lot easier of a, oh yeah, we need a boost kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I still think we're time away from, unless there's an injury, seeing a call up. Just a gut feel based on the Winnipeg Jets as an org. I just have trouble seeing them going down to the Moose and saying, hey, you know what, time to give this guy a shot because we need a shot in the arm when we're 15-3.
Could see Toninato just get the call up just to give him an NHL check for a couple days too, if it's nothing too serious.
Him or Axel, yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the prospects. Let's go down to junior, where there's some exciting starts. Braden Yager, my favorite center prospect in Winnipeg at this point, I got to say. 17 games played, 10 goals, 14 assists.
Wow.
Talks of him being the number one center for Team Canada come Christmas.
Him and Easton Cowan on the line are going to be nasty out there.
Yeah, it's good to see him really, really excelling with the Moose Jaw Warriors. And it's another guy where I think just the profile of where he's strong in should make him an NHLer, and we'll see where the upside goes. From there, Kevin He, we talked about quickly. He continues his hot start with 19 games played for the Draft Plus One, 17 goals, 12 assists.
Whoa.
Yeah. And we're talking some of like highlight of the night, pretty goals coming from him. This skill that he's unleashed in that league, whew.
He's going to fuck around and end up in the top 6.
Right? Like, no, if you just look at jumps, obviously that's been an exciting one.
To get a player to him would be such a grand slam home run for the org.
Another interesting Draft Plus One, Kieran Walton, who was a 6th-round pick. In his first, and a 6th-round pick with some size. I believe he's 6'7". We could keep the 6'7" lore going if Kieran Walton comes around. 19 games played, 9 goals, 16 assists for 25 points for a 6th-rounder.
Wow. What league? What team?
He's with the Sudbury Wolves in the OHL.
Okay.
So nice to see a jump there. Like to see over a point a game like that for a 6th-rounder in his first year past the draft. Like we're not looking at a 20-year-old in the CHL. We're still looking at a 19-year-old. I think that's quality to see.
Joe's got some really great talent in it this year, right? Which is per usual, to be honest.
For sure. Zach Nearing, another interesting little jump up in his projection or his career. Joined the NCAA this year, first year at Western Michigan, and 8 games played, 3 goals, 3 assists. Take that in that league.
Yeah.
And then the disappointing one, though he's seemingly picked up the pace on the goal side of things. Colby Barlow, Oshawa. 19 games played, 7 goals, 3 assists for the 1st-rounder.
Oof.
Yeah, not a lovely start over there.
What's Chaz Lucius at these days? He's still a Jet, isn't he?
He
I always
is.
forgot. I know he's dealing with injuries, but like I haven't heard much out of that corner of the depth chart in a long time.
I mean, in theory, he's still a Jet. He's played 3 games with the Moose so far this year. He has 2 assists in them, and we'll see when we see him. It's just one of those guys. I just don't know what to expect at this point. Clearly has the talent. Clearly his body doesn't physically want to agree with him playing the sport. So it's
hard.
It's a talent pick, and when he plays, like there's clearly a player.
Yeah.
But he's also just lost so much development time at this point too.
Yeah. Just like Ian Scott pick the Leafs took over Jeremy Swayman. That guy was looking really good. Then his body just fell apart. I think he retired by the time he was 22.
And out of all those prospects, what is the one thing that is similar for each and every one of them outside of Elias Salmonson?
I'm going to guess Canadian pick. No more college players?
Not quite. They are all forwards. So, again, I will hammer home the point. The Winnipeg Jets have a very deep hockey team when it comes to quality NHL forwards. They could probably use an upgrade of 2 seed, but as far as like the core group of it, the depth of it, there's 13 NHL forwards in Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. They're no longer the years where the 4th line probably should be in the Moose. So they have a deep forward group. They have one hole you'd like to upgrade there, which would slide Vlad down to the 4th line, which all of a sudden your depth gets even better. Not all of these guys are going to become NHLers. Likely, most of them will not. Some of them might be at their best value. It's time for the organization to really look at which ones they believe are their keepers and which ones they can offload, because this team deserves them to do so.
Yep. You wouldn't believe how much a throw-in goes to sway a trade that's a 50-50 with another team too, right? You never know.
And yeah, half these guys, even if they didn't make it, we're talking about years down the road when the window isn't quite as rosy, potentially.
No.
Go move some of them for a quality D-man Chevy. Come on, baby.
Why not?
Come on, baby. Speaking of D, yeah, not liking where the talk on the right side of the Winnipeg Jets is going. So they signed Dylan DeMello 4 years. What was it, 4.9?
Yeah.
5.1?
I think so.
And my boy, I make no bones about it. I've been a big Dylan DeMello guy. I was very big a proponent of that contract. Off to a really, really tough start early on in that deal. And now, and it's been so obvious too, but now we're seeing it really pick up talk. Neil Pionk has the hot start, and we're reading that it's very likely he's re-signing in Winnipeg. And it's just like when you start to think about this, I think it's very clear that the Winnipeg Jets have. I think Morrissey and Sandberg are quality top 4 defensemen. I love where Dylan Sandberg's game is going. The one thing I kept saying is, like, you got an elite 3rd pairing guy. Let's see what happens when he moves into that top 4, because it is a big jump. And I think so far this year he's handling it well. There's been a couple of rough games for him and Pionk, but I think Sandberg looks the part of a shutdown in the modern style of game. And you know a guy like that's not going to cost much on the cap either when you go and sign him this summer. But all of a sudden we're talking about it's highly likely that Neil Pionk extends after 3 years of Neil Pionk not being worth his current contract to the Winnipeg Jets. And a start that is obviously exciting if you look at the D points race. But if you look at the 5-on-5 and when it falls apart, I just don't think I've ever seen a gap as wide as good Neil Pionk and bad Neil Pionk. Like there's no like middle ground where you could find it and just be like steady. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think that's the guy you bet on into his 30s when you've already lost value on the first deal you put him through. And then you also look at it from a cap and management standpoint. You're going to be spending $9 million, $10 million, $11 million on Dylan DeMello and Neil Pionk to not have a top pairing right-handed defenseman. You end up backing yourself into the spot you were in when you went and traded for Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt, and signed Neil Pionk to this deal. When they traded for Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, obviously that team needed defense. It was their biggest issue the year before. But they had depth in terms of guys that were close to being NHL-ready prospect. Like Sandberg was on the cusp. Hainla was on the cusp. Stanley, whatever you think of him, I don't think highly, was in the NHL. So you had young guys on the left side. When you go and make those financial moves like Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt, when you need that upper-level guy, you haven't raised the ceiling. You've definitely raised your floor. But that big hole is still there. And if you just look at the cap usage, combined, Dillon and Schmidt were 5.95 plus 3.9. So we're looking at nearly $9 million.
Yeah.
What is a top pairing right-handed guy, if you're ever gonna find one, gonna cost you?
About that, maybe a couple million more or $1 million more.
So all of a sudden, if you start spending that kind of money or more on Dylan DeMello and Neil Pionk to eventually be probably your RD2 and RD3 as those contracts age, you're betting everything on Elias Salmonson panning out. And I love Elias Salmonson. That puts your org just in such a massive spot on such a young kid to really pan out if you want to take another step. I just do not feel comfortable with where that conversation's going. It's going to happen. I'm going to groan about it when it does. But you got to think bigger picture here on how to fix this decor. Like, that's the spot we're talking about needing improvement today. Never mind in years 3, 4 of that next deal. That's nervous, brother. I'm nervous about it. I know it's been a good start. But that's just, that's the spot you need to upgrade. You need to upgrade it, brother. Chevy, don't do this to me. I'm so scared about next summer, man.
Well, shall we stop it there before we get into the Monday scaries?
Yeah, let's do that. Though interesting on the D stuff, we did see Arniel and the staff make the little tweak of giving DeMello softer minutes late in that Florida game, pairing him with Hayden Fleury. I wonder if we see Scott Arniel and company take the Dylan DeMello, Logan Stanley concept from the old, before the Seattle expansion draft when we somehow protected Logan Stanley over Dylan DeMello because Dylan DeMello carried him up the ice all year. Whatever. I wonder if they take that idea right now with how much he's struggling in upper minutes to put him beside Ville Heinola to work him in on a third pair in protected minutes, softer situation. And if they try and give Morrissey Miller for a bit just to stabilize things for a bit. I'm not certain Miller is going to be the long-term answer there, but it's just one of those things that I'm having trouble. And I've had some people reach out really concerned about the idea Dylan DeMello might be washed. I have a lot of trouble this quickly saying that, but it's clearly been a problem. Give him that breather and see if he can find himself again.
Yeah.
And you could use Dylan DeMello. We've seen him really sync up nice with a young player beside him. I think he would fit Hainola's game pretty well. Maybe we see something like that. I'm curious about it now.
Absolutely.
But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being here. Congratulations to Phyllis Lowen. If you aren't listening to the post-game show, the landing strip, you're missing out on a chance to go to Winnipeg Jets games as she had won tickets to the Florida Panthers game. And all she did was answer our question on YouTube on what the question of the day was, and it's that simple. So I'm just saying, if you want some chances to win maybe some merch, maybe some tickets, maybe just join the community and have some fun talking Jets hockey after games, make sure you come over to YouTube or twitch.tv. Soon to be TikTok too. We're working on that. We're really trying to get going here. The landing strip post-game show, you have a chance to call in, chance to be a part of the chat and have your opinions discussed on the show. Honestly, that's been the most fun for me on this side of it, is seeing the different opinions, diving into different stances, what's really pressing to people in this moment and what they're seeing. I had someone reach out yesterday, which I think this is what I really like about doing this show, and it's part of why I wanted to start podcasting and diving into sports media or whatever, is I had someone reach out and say, you know what, man, thank you for what you had to say on this topic. I finally feel heard in this market about this. And honestly, that's part of my motivation is I felt unheard on a lot of the coverage around the Winnipeg Jets. So if you want to feel heard, you want to come hang out, the landing strip post game, we'll see you guys on here, on this version of the show, the Top Line Winnipeg show, next Monday. We'll see you at the Top Line landing strip Tuesday night after the rematch against Florida. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a Top Line Media production.